Have you ever noticed how some people only love you when you're easy to love? When your laughter doesn't challenge theirs, when your success doesn't outshine them, when your presence doesn't make them question their own worth. There's a kind of friendship that feels warm on the surface. The smile that stays too long, the compliment that lands but never reaches the eyes, the hug that hides distance beneath closeness. You sense something is off, but you tell yourself not to be paranoid, because how could someone who calls you a friend be quietly rooting for your fall? You remember the first time it happened. Maybe it was in childhood you shared your excitement about something small, something pure, a drawing you made, a prize you won, a dream you whispered. They smiled, but it wasn't real. You felt it in your stomach, a twist, a subtle rejection dressed as politeness. You learned early that not every cheer meant celebration, and not every friend was happy when you rose. That confusion, that ache, became the blueprint of your trust. You learned to second-guess your joy, to dim yourself just enough to be safe. As you grew older, the pattern followed. You met people who said all the right things, who listened just enough to make you believe they cared, but their silence during your hardest moments told the truth. You started noticing it, how some friends only text when they need something, how they disappear when you crumble, how their "I'm proud of you" sounds more like "I'm keeping up." It's not that they hate you, it's that your light threatens the parts of them still in shadow. Psychologists call this covert envy, the kind that doesn't lash out, it observes, mimics, and slowly withdraws warmth. Social comparison theory explains how your achievements can unconsciously feel like proof of another person's inadequacy. Their brain interprets your growth as a personal failure. And because the ego hates what it cannot control, it hides behind a mask of friendliness while quietly collecting your weaknesses. You don't realize you're in a one-sided bond until you notice how tired you feel after every interaction. There's something deeply human in this deception, a tragic irony. We crave connection, yet our insecurities make us compete instead. We say we want love, but we measure worth like currency. Somewhere along the way, friendship became performance. Smiles traded for validation, affection bartered for usefulness. And in that silent exchange, authenticity dies. So you begin to ask yourself, who would still stand beside you if everything you had to offer vanished? Who would still stay if you stopped giving, stopped listening, stopped pretending everything was fine? That's the question that haunts most people, the quiet fear of realizing that some of your closest bonds were built on convenience, not care. Because behind every familiar smile, there's a truth you can feel but can't quite name, and it's time you learn to see it for what it really is. Have you ever wondered why you keep giving people second chances they never earn? Why you sense the red flags, feel the sting in your gut, and still choose to stay? It's not weakness, it's conditioning. Somewhere long before adulthood, you learned that love was not a given. It had to be earned, negotiated, proven. Picture a child sitting quietly at the edge of a room, watching their parents' mood before deciding if it's safe to speak. They learn early that affection is a currency, that silence keeps peace, and that attention must be bought with obedience. They notice how warmth comes after achievement, how love appears when they're easy to handle and vanishes when they're not. And in that invisible classroom of survival, they master the art of tolerance, the dangerous kind. Neuroscience calls this conditioning of safety. The child's brain, shaped by inconsistency, links love to uncertainty. Dopamine spikes not from peace, but from the unpredictable, the maybe this time hope that becomes addictive. Psychologists studying attachment theory explain it as anxious bonding when the nervous system confuses instability with passion, when absence feels like a test you must pass to be worthy of care. You learn to chase approval, not love, to soothe others at the cost of yourself. So as you grow, you find yourself drawn to familiar patterns. You attract the ones who take more than they give, who confuse kindness for compliance. You tell yourself you're being understanding, but deep down, it's that old child still trying to fix what was broken at home. You call it forgiveness, but it's fear in disguise. Fear that setting a boundary will make them leave. Fear that saying, "This hurts me," will make them love you less. And so you smile when you should speak. You stay when you should walk away, and you explain their betrayal like it's your fault for expecting too much. You don't see it, but your tolerance becomes a cage. Every time you silence your discomfort, your brain mistakes pain for safety because that's what it was taught. You think you're strong for enduring, but endurance without protection isn't strength, it's self-abandonment. If you've ever felt the sting of realizing someone only stood beside you when it benefited them, don't pause this. Because by the end, I'll show you how to recognize real loyalty and walk away from silent betrayal before it breaks you again. The truth is, you never ignored the red flags, you were just trained to see them as normal. You were raised to believe that love is supposed to hurt a little, that empathy means overextending, that being a good person means forgiving everything. But the same lessons that once kept you safe are now the ones keeping you stuck. And as you sit in the quiet after another disappointment, you begin to feel it, the faint voice inside that says you deserve more. That voice is not naive. It's the part of you that remembers what love is supposed to feel, like calm, consistent, reciprocal. It's not too late to listen. Have you ever noticed how often you say, "It's fine," when it isn't? How you smile in rooms where your heart quietly folds in on itself? You've built a mask so natural it almost feels like skin, the kind that smiles while bleeding underneath. It began as survival. Now it's who you've become. You learned long ago that peace comes at a price. Your silence, that to be loved, you must be agreeable, predictable, easy to digest. So you grew into an adult who forgives too quickly, who explains the pain of others but not your own, who apologizes just to stop the air from tensing. When someone disrespects you, you tell yourself they didn't mean it. When someone forgets you, you laugh it off, you shrink to fit, and you call it maturity. But really, it's fear in disguise, the fear of being unloved if you ever stopped being nice. Psychologists call it fawning, the fourth trauma response. Beyond fight, flight, or freeze, it's the reflex to please, to make others comfortable, so you don't have to feel the discomfort of rejection. Dr. Pete Walker, who studied complex trauma, explains that fawning is emotional camouflage. It's not kindness, it's conditioning. Your nervous system learned that safety came from making yourself useful, agreeable, harmless. Every "don't worry about it" and "it's okay" became a tiny act of self-erasure, a sacrifice of authenticity for approval. But the body keeps score. Over time, your nervous system grows exhausted from constant performance. You begin to notice cracks moments when you hear yourself laugh and wonder whose laughter it really is. You look in the mirror and see someone you recognize but don't truly know, because that mask you wear, that practiced smile, that calm voice, was meant to protect you. Yet, somewhere along the way, it started protecting everyone from you, from your truth, your anger, your real self. It's a strange tragedy. The nicer you become, the lonelier you feel. You attract people who love your softness, but not your soul. You make yourself so easy to be around that no one ever wonders how hard it is to be you. And when you finally try to express pain, no one believes it because the mask you built was too convincing. There's a moment that changes everything, when you finally say no and hear the silence that follows. It's jarring, the sound of boundaries forming where self-abandonment once lived. But beneath that silence lies peace, the kind that doesn't demand you to perform for love anymore. You begin to realize that true kindness isn't about being agreeable, it's about being honest. Real love doesn't require you to edit yourself to be accepted. It invites the unfiltered version of you, the one you hid behind years of politeness. And so, the mask begins to crack, not as a collapse, but as liberation, because the person underneath was never weak, only waiting. Have you ever noticed how the people who take the most from you are often the ones who speak the loudest about loyalty? They use words like trust and forever, but what they really mean is, as long as you serve my comfort. You tell yourself it's noble to stand by them, to stay patient, to forgive endlessly, because you've been taught that loyalty means never leaving. But psychology tells a different story. Loyalty, without boundaries, is not devotion, it's self-erasure. Dr. Henry Cloud, in his book Boundaries, describes something most of us learn too late. Love without limits is not love, it's fusion. When your sense of self dissolves into someone else's moods, expectations, and guilt trips, you stop being loyal to them and start betraying yourself. Boundaries are not walls, they're oxygen, masks. They don't block love, they keep it breathable. Without them, every relationship becomes a slow drowning, a performance of endurance mistaken for care. Attachment theory explains this beautifully. People with anxious attachment often equate love with suffering. They were raised to believe that closeness means tolerating discomfort, that to keep connection alive, you must keep yourself small. So, they attract those who feed on that tolerance, people who call manipulation care and control protection. The brain, conditioned by inconsistency, mistakes anxiety for connection. It's why you feel the most alive with people who make you the most uneasy, because your nervous system has learned to confuse chaos with intimacy. And then there's the illusion of empathy, what neuroscience calls emotional contagion. Mirror neurons, the cells responsible for our ability to feel what others feel, can be easily manipulated. Fake friends mimic concern. They mirror your expressions, your tone, your sadness, not because they care, but because it maintains their access to your emotional world. They study your pain the way a thief studies a lock, looking for the easiest way in. True empathy isn't imitation. It's resonance, the kind you can feel in your chest, where words are unnecessary and silence is safe. Dr. Gabor Mate says it best. Authenticity is the first casualty of attachment. You learn to trade your truth for approval, to stay silent just to keep someone's love intact. But the cost of that silence is identity itself. You can't be both endlessly loyal to others and honestly loyal to yourself. The body knows this imbalance. It shows up as exhaustion, resentment, the quiet wish to disappear when you're surrounded by people who claim to love you. Science and soul agree on one thing: energy doesn't lie. You can pretend to be fine, but your nervous system knows the truth. You can keep giving, but your body keeps score. And one day, you'll feel it, that sacred exhaustion that doesn't come from overwork, but from overextending. It's then you'll realize loyalty isn't proven by how much pain you can tolerate. It's revealed by how much truth you can hold. Have you ever wondered why the people who hurt you the most often feel strangely familiar, almost as if you've known them long before you met them? It's because, in a way, you have. The human psyche has a strange pull toward the familiar, even when the familiar is pain. We call it connection, but sometimes it's just recognition, your unhealed wounds finding their reflection in someone else's brokenness. Not every fake friend means to harm you. Some are simply lost in their own shadow, the part of themselves they've never faced, the one they project onto you. They envy your strength because it mirrors their weakness. They resent your calm because it exposes their chaos. They cling to you, not out of love, but out of hunger, the hunger to feel complete through your light. And you, in turn, stay, because their inconsistency feels like home. Their silence feels like something you've been bracing for your whole life. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But not all transformations are gentle. Sometimes they burn. What you mistake for friendship can often be the psyche's way of reenacting what it never resolved. You replay the same emotional patterns, the neglect, the betrayal, the silence, hoping this time it ends differently. Yet it rarely does. Because until awareness enters the story, the characters never change their lines. Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to relive trauma in new forms, seeking mastery over it. You attract what feels unfinished. The fake friend, in this light, isn't just a deceiver, they're a messenger. They show you where you still bleed. They reflect the parts of you that crave validation more than peace, the places where your boundaries dissolve in exchange for belonging. There's a quiet horror in realizing that your pain doesn't just find you, it chooses you, through faces you once trusted. It's like standing in a hall of mirrors where every reflection smiles differently, yet none of them look real. The friend who compliments you but secretly competes. The one who confides in you but never truly listens. They're all actors in a story your younger self wrote, a story about proving you're worthy, even when love turns cruel. You think you're choosing them freely, but often it's your shadow choosing for you. That's why letting go feels so unbearable. It's not just the person you're releasing, it's the old version of you who believed they needed them. And so, the next time someone's warmth feels cold around the edges, ask yourself, what part of me is being mirrored here? Is this friendship, or is this my past in disguise? Because sometimes, the people who betray you are not villains, they're reflections, and they're showing you the truth your heart has been too afraid to see. Have you noticed how the modern world worships the illusion of happiness? Everywhere you turn, there's someone smiling through their exhaustion, posting filtered laughter while quietly unraveling inside. We've built a culture that demands positivity, like it's oxygen, good vibes only, no drama, stay grateful. But beneath that pastel-colored philosophy lies a quiet epidemic of emotional dishonesty. We've mistaken suppression for peace and performance for connection. You've felt it too, haven't you? That pressure to keep the peace, to swallow discomfort because being real might make others uncomfortable. You tell yourself you're keeping things light, but really, you're hiding your truth under layers of calm tone and polite laughter. Somewhere between the hashtags and the highlight reels, friendship became theatre. The lines between authenticity and appearance blurred until people stopped being honest altogether. We began performing closeness, texting hearts without meaning, exchanging compliments that feel hollow, pretending to care just enough to avoid guilt. This culture of relentless optimism punishes emotional depth. To say, "I'm not okay," is to risk being labelled negative. To call out betrayal is to be seen as dramatic. And so, you learn to keep quiet. You start editing your emotions, curating your sadness into digestible fragments. You stop sharing the raw truth, because truth doesn't trend well. What thrives instead is artificial warmth, the kind that looks radiant on the surface, but vanishes the moment you need something real. Philosophically, it's nothing new. Plato once described the people in his allegory of the cave, staring at shadows on the wall, believing them to be reality. That's what this world of good vibes only has become, a digital cave where we mistake friendliness for friendship, positivity for peace, light for healing. We chase the shadow of connection instead of the substance. But the tragedy is that real light, the kind that frees you, doesn't always feel pleasant. Sometimes it burns before it warms. Sometimes truth feels like betrayal before it sets you free. Psychologists have long warned about the emotional cost of suppression. Studies on emotional regulation show that chronic avoidance doesn't heal pain, it buries it. Dr. Gabor Mate calls this the disease of authenticity, where people disconnect from their true emotions just to remain accepted. Over time, that disconnection corrodes the nervous system. You become numb to anger, to joy, even to love. Because when you suppress one emotion, you suppress them all. And so, society celebrates emotional neutrality, while the soul quietly starves for something real. We call it peace, but it's just a truce built on silence. You scroll through perfect lives and wonder why yours feels so heavy, not realizing that behind every curated smile lies the same loneliness, the same ache for something unfiltered. Eventually, you start to sense the lie. The good vibes begin to feel like static, and you start craving something different, not perfection, not performance, but truth. Because connection built on pretending isn't connection at all. It's captivity, disguised as harmony. Have you ever noticed how betrayal doesn't always come crashing down in one violent moment? Sometimes it arrives quietly in glances, avoided, in apologies that never come, in conversations that feel emptier than silence. It's the kind of pain that doesn't scream. It hums beneath the surface of your daily life, soft enough to ignore but heavy enough to suffocate. And over time, you start to feel it, the slow erosion of your sense of self, the quiet fading of the person you once were before you learned to swallow your truth. Silent betrayal is not just what someone does to you, it's what you do to yourself to survive it. You tell yourself it's not worth the fight. You tell yourself they didn't mean it. You convince your mind that peace is better than honesty, that pretending everything's fine is easier than facing what isn't. But somewhere deep inside, your body keeps the score. Every time you silence your discomfort, it stores the unspoken tension like static under your skin, and slowly, your nervous system begins to ache with the weight of all the words you never said. Psychologists call this betrayal trauma, the wound that forms when the person you depend on is the one who harms you, leaving you unable to confront them because confrontation would risk losing them entirely. The mind splits in two, one part desperate to stay connected, the other screaming to be free. Dr. Jennifer Freyd, who coined the term, explained that the human brain prioritizes attachment over truth. It would rather live in denial than lose belonging. That's why you stay quiet even when you know you're being hurt. Because to speak the truth might mean facing the loneliness you've spent a lifetime running from. But silence is never neutral. It begins to rot. Friendships that once felt alive start to decay from the inside. Every shared laugh feels thinner, every gesture a little more hollow. You begin to sense the distance like a ghost standing between you, visible only to you. The laughter you once cherished now tastes like acid on your tongue. You smile because you should, not because you feel it. And at night, when everything is still, the betrayal whispers back through the quiet, reminding you of the boundaries you never set, the truth you never spoke, the parts of yourself you abandoned just to keep someone close. Eventually, something breaks. It's not dramatic, it's devastatingly simple. One day, you wake up and realize you don't trust your own feelings anymore. You can't tell if you're angry or numb, hurt or indifferent. You've spent so long being understanding that you've forgotten what it means to be understood. And that's when the silence turns into something louder than any argument, the internal scream of a self that refuses to disappear any longer. Because betrayal doesn't always end with goodbye. Sometimes it ends when you finally decide to stop betraying yourself. You don't need confrontation to see who's real. Life, in its quietest moments, will test your connections for you. The truth of friendship doesn't reveal itself in words, but in reactions in the small, unnoticed spaces between gestures. These moments are not loud, they're subtle, almost imperceptible, but they speak volumes. The first test comes in success. When something finally goes right for you, when the call comes through, when your work is recognized, watch the eyes around you. Real friends glow with you, fake ones flinch. Neuroscientists call it emotional attunement, the ability to feel joy for another as if it were your own. In envy, that mirror fails. A fake friend smiles, but the muscles around their eyes stay still. It's a micro-expression your intuition catches, even if your mind denies it. That's the first crack in the mask, the absence of warmth in what should be celebration. The second test comes in silence, when your world falls quiet and there's nothing for them to gain from your presence. Notice who still shows up without invitation, who doesn't need you to be shining to stand beside you. Dr. John Gottman's research on emotional connection found that real closeness thrives not on grand gestures, but on bids, the small moments of turning towards someone's emotional need. Fake friends turn away. They vanish when your vulnerability no longer flatters their self-image. Then comes the test of honesty, the moment you finally say no. It's one of the most revealing words in the language. To those who only loved your compliance, it sounds like betrayal. To those who love you truly, it sounds like truth. You can feel it instantly, how their tone hardens, how their body shifts, how affection turns conditional. This is where you learn that not everyone wants your authenticity. Some only want your obedience. The next test comes in conflict. Not the explosive kind, but the quiet disagreements that ask for empathy over ego. A fake friend argues to win. A real one listens to understand. Psychology calls this emotional differentiation, the ability to stay connected even while disagreeing. Those who lack it treat boundaries as rejection and distance as punishment. They make you choose between peace and self-respect, knowing you've been conditioned to pick peace. There's also the test of time, the slow erosion of novelty. When you stop being new, exciting, useful, who remains? It's strange how absence becomes the final truth teller. The ones who disappear when you no longer serve their ego were never truly there for your soul. Each of these tests unfolds silently, almost poetically. You don't need to expose anyone, just observe. Because loyalty doesn't shout, it endures. Boundaries, after all, are not barriers to love. They are filters for truth. And every silent test you pass brings you closer to the rare kind of connection that doesn't drain you, it restores you. There comes a moment, usually after the last disappointment, the final silence, the message that never arrives when something inside you shifts. Not with anger, but with understanding. You realize that all this time you weren't weak for caring too much. You were just trained to forget your own worth. The pain you've carried wasn't proof that you were broken, it was evidence that you had depth, that you felt things others only pretended to. And now, slowly, you begin to see that the path to healing isn't about becoming colder, it's about becoming clearer. You start by listening not to others, but to the quiet voice beneath your exhaustion, the one that says, "I don't feel safe here." That's your nervous system speaking, not your paranoia. Dr. Gabor Mate calls this the conflict between authenticity and attachment. When you've been conditioned to prioritize belonging over truth, you lose the ability to hear yourself. Every yes that should have been a no erodes your self-trust. Reclaiming power begins the moment you honor that inner whisper, instead of silencing it for someone else's comfort. In internal family systems therapy, they teach that within you lives not one self, but many: the protector, the pleaser, the wounded child. Each carries a story of survival. When you begin to recognize them with compassion instead of judgment, you stop reacting and start understanding. The fawn response, that automatic instinct to appease and keep the peace, softens its grip. You begin to realize that boundaries aren't walls, they're directions for love. They teach others how to treat you, and more importantly, they remind you that you deserve to be treated well. Then comes the body. Healing doesn't happen through thought alone. As Dr. Bessel van der Kolk writes in The Body Keeps the Score, trauma lives in the flesh, in tight shoulders, shallow breath, restless nights. Somatic awareness brings you home. You learn to notice what your body says before your mind rationalizes it away. The tension in your chest when someone lies. The fatigue that follows a forced smile. These are not flaws, they are signals. Your body has always been on your side, you just stopped listening. And, through all of this, something remarkable happens. Empathy transforms from a weapon turned against you into a form of wisdom. You can still care deeply, but now, without abandoning yourself, you forgive, not to erase the past, but to release your future from it. You stop chasing closure from others because you've built it within. When you finally walk away from what drains you, you'll notice it's not loss you're feeling, it's space. Space for peace, for people who match your depth, for love that doesn't demand your silence. Because you were never losing friends, you were only losing illusions. And what's left, after the illusion burns away, is something unshakable, you. There is a strange kind of peace that arrives after loss, not the loss of love, but the loss of illusion. The moment you stop begging for warmth from people who keep you cold, something shifts inside you. The silence that once terrified you becomes sacred. You realize that solitude was never the enemy. It was the space where truth waited patiently for you to come home. Friendship, you now understand, is not measured by how long someone stays, but by what they bring when they do. Most people confuse proximity with loyalty, noise with care, but the ones who truly see you don't need to speak loudly. They exist like gravity, quiet, unseen, but unmistakably real. It's only in darkness that light reveals its purity, and it's only through betrayal that loyalty gains meaning. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Real connection transforms you. It does not deplete you. It doesn't demand you to shrink to fit someone's comfort, nor does it ask you to perform joy when you're aching inside. It simply holds space for who you are, the whole, flawed, evolving self that never needed to beg for understanding. In a world that celebrates appearance over essence, you begin to see how rare that kind of presence truly is. The fake smiles, the curated empathy, the transactional kindness, they were all shadows dancing on the wall, as Plato described in his cave. For so long, you mistook those shadows for sunlight. You chased validation, not realizing that what you truly needed was resonance, the stillness that happens when two souls meet without masks. Neuroscience tells us that genuine human connection has measurable power. When someone truly listens not to reply, but to understand, the brain releases oxytocin, the hormone of safety and trust. Your heart rate synchronizes, your nervous system relaxes. For a brief moment, the body forgets it's been at war with itself. That is what real connection feels like. Not adrenaline, not performance, but peace. And so, you stop seeking people who make you feel seen for a moment, and start valuing those who make you feel safe for a lifetime. You stop confusing attention with affection and presence with depth. You start choosing honesty over harmony, truth over comfort. And in doing so, you no longer chase love, you embody it. You walk away from false warmth, the kind that burns you slow, and step into the cold clarity of authenticity. Because it's in that quiet honesty where real friendship begins, two souls unmasked, two hearts unafraid, meeting not to escape loneliness, but to honor it together. And in that moment, you understand connection was never about who stayed beside you, but about who helped you return to yourself.